Hello, and welcome to this Ask the Expert session. My name is Dr. Brian Chernak. I'm an attending physician on the Leukemia Service at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York. In a recent program titled From Indolent to Aggressive, Case-Based Strategies Across the Spectrum of Systemic Mastocytosis, we offered learners the opportunity to ask our experts some clinical questions that came up for them while they were reviewing this activity. Today, I'll be providing answers to those questions submitted. First question, how does omalizumab work to prevent recurrent anaphylaxis and skin symptoms in patients with non-advanced SM? Omalizumab is a monoclonal antibody. It binds free IgE in the blood and also prevents IgE and Fc epsilon receptor 1 interactions found on these mast cells and other immune mediators. IgE binds so tightly to these receptors on mast cells that it essentially has primed these mast cells for an allergen to bind and immediately lead to mast cell degranulation, which leads to the symptoms that patients often present with. Ultimately, omalizumab leads to the downregulation of Fc epsilon R1 receptors on mast cells and again prevents this IgE from binding to these receptors on the mast cells. Ultimately, this leads to a decrease in mast cell activation and thus a reduction of this mast cell-associated cytokine release that leads to these skin and anaphylactic-like symptoms that we see in many of our patients. It's a great second-line option for patients, especially who have severe pulmonary or cardiovascular symptoms, who have failed classical antihistamines and occasionally use of corticosteroids, as well as for patients that have recurrent unprovoked anaphylaxis. Oftentimes, if patients are being considered for omalizumab, consultation with our allergists, who are experts in this field, is an excellent choice for further management. Next question, is a negative KIT D816V result from the peripheral blood sufficient to exclude a diagnosis of SM? This is a great question, and this comes up both in my own clinical practice and when speaking to many of my collaborators. The short answer is peripheral blood testing alone for the KIT D816V mutation is not sufficient to rule out systemic mastocytosis. There's a number of reasons why this is the case. I think the most important point is that most of the commercially available molecular testing that we can perform is a next-generation sequencing platform, which really only allows us to get down to a level of detection of about 1% to 2% at best. The median variant allele frequency of the KIT D816V mutation of patients with SM is around 0.1 to 0.15%. So it's really important that you make sure if you're sending this peripheral test, you're using an allele-specific PCR, like digital droplet PCR testing, to essentially try to detect this. And simply put, many of these patients may still test negative on that testing. Importantly as well, the absence of the KIT D816V mutation does not rule out this diagnosis. This result is one of the minor criteria, whether it by WHO or ICC, and therefore some of our patients ultimately are KIT negative. Bone marrow testing for the digital droplet PCR for the KIT mutation is something that can be performed as well, which will have a little bit higher sensitivity to identify this disease. Again, I tend to use the personalized management strategies in mast cell disorders review by the ECNM and AIM kind of users guide that was published in 2022, which provides a great reference for what to do when your patient has typical clinical findings or symptoms that are suggestive of SM, but has a negative KIT D816V mutation. We typically use either the ECNM Fuchs score or the REMA score based on the clinical scenario to help discern which patients we can effectively forego a bone marrow biopsy. But in many cases, we ultimately will pursue it because most bone marrow biopsies, while they may be uncomfortable for patients, are typically quite a low-risk procedure. Most of my patients I see in my practice are already coming to me with a biopsy finding consistent with mast cell aggregates, and those patients I will perform a bone marrow biopsy in essentially every situation. One last point to consider is that in a patient who has a negative KIT D816V mutation by allele-specific PCR testing, but still has many of the symptoms that are similar to SM, you should consider testing for the rare tyrosine kinase fusion gene-associated disorders, including PDGFR or FGFR rearranged disease, as some of these subtypes are overlap in terms of their symptoms with patients with SM, and should especially be considered in a patient who has, again, the negative KIT testing and associated eosinophilia on laboratory results. Next question. When should hereditary alpha tryptasemia testing be investigated in patients undergoing evaluation for SM? Truly, HAT testing, as we typically call it, can be considered for patients that have recurrent symptoms and have no evidence of SM. Many of these cases are often patients who have an elevated tryptase. Maybe they have many of the symptoms that resemble SM, but they've already undergone a bone marrow biopsy, or by the ECNM Fuchs score or REMA score, you have a very low suspicion that these patients have underlying disease. Most of the time, again, these patients have already undergone a bone marrow biopsy, and you can then perform this test to look for whether or not HAT maybe is the underlying diagnosis. Oftentimes, this is also conducted in collaboration with our allergy colleagues. Finally, when should cromolyn sodium be used for symptom management in patients with SM? In my practice, I use cromolyn sodium, especially with patients with predominantly GI and neurologic symptoms. These might be the patients who have ongoing diarrhea and nausea, or severe headaches and fatigue. And typically, I use this as really an adjunctive option after patients have failed typical antihistamines. Cromolyn really acts to prevent the release of the molecules like histamine and leukotrienes, known to trigger many of these symptoms, and really can be that kind of adjunctive therapy. Critically, what I tend to do for my patients is I provide them a list of the classical, both non-sedating and sedating H1 and H2 antihistamines, and make sure I've tried some combinations of both of these at various dosages and various specific types before I consider cromolyn. But it can be a great secondary option, and patients do find some benefit from this option as well. Thank you for your time today. I hope you found this information useful. If you would like a more in-depth look at non-advanced SM, please review the full-length accredited CME program, which can be found at www.exchangecme.com. And please subscribe to Exchange CME's YouTube channel and check back regularly for updates on systemic mastocytosis.